No, I had to drive because he wasn't allowed to drive.
Why not?
He'd lost his license.
Are you serious?
That's why he had to have a chauffeur.
He lost his license and he's a race car driver.
Yeah.
Why did he lose his license?
Probably speeding.
Welcome back to the podcast. Chalice Paul Disappeared, the True Story. Today we have a special guest, somebody who remembers John Paul Sr. and another name that we haven't really covered too much, another missing person who was involved with John Paul Sr., and that is David Joseph Cassorla. So her name is Nancy Baker. Nancy, hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Nancy found me. How did you find me? That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. How did you find me?
Oh, I was looking at some of the links and podcasts on John Paul.
Okay, so you happen to just be on podcasts or a Google search and you found John Paul or any stories attached to him? Because it sounded like when we first talked, you weren't aware of what happened to Chalice.
No, I wasn't aware of that. I was listening to some sports announcers talking about John Paul.
Okay, so maybe that was Crime and Sports, the two comedians who did a satirical piece. Okay, we added the video portion to that 2 parts. We made it into 2 parts. It's on the Chalice Paul YouTube channel. And if anybody's listening out there, you need to go to the YouTube channel and follow us. We're trying to build that up, and we're actually adding some photos to each segment of the podcast of what we've done to date. So, because it's more of a visual aid, as you know, on YouTube. But with podcasts, it's all just, audio, which is fine. So we don't have to worry about how we look today. On a beautiful Sunday afternoon. So, Nancy, let me start off with, how did you meet John Paul Sr.?
Well, I moved down to Florida and was staying with some friends and looking for a job. And it happened to be in the want ads that he needed a chauffeur and a house sitter.
You need a chauffeur and a house sitter. So he wanted 2 different people, or they wanted somebody to do both?
No, just one person.
Okay. So you took which position you take?
Well, it was one person, so I did all.
Oh, okay. That's what I meant. You did it all. So you were the chauffeur, you were the housekeeper, the cook, everything? Okay. All right. So, what was your timeline of employment? What year was this? Do you know? I know.
Well, I looked up. He had won the 24 Hours of Daytona in 1977, and I came to work for him right after that because he had all the crew come over to the house and watch the race on the TV.
Okay, so that's how you clarified your timeline, is because of the race. What race was that in 1977? You recall?
It was a Daytona 24-hour.
Oh, okay. It was an endurance race. Got it.
Yes.
Okay. Was his son racing with him then, or he hadn't started yet?
He hadn't started yet.
Okay. All right. So explain the house. We have located the house and we've photographed it and we put it up for believe it or not, on the segment of Crime and Sports. We were able to find the house and we did aerial shots and everything on that. But explain to me what the house looked like.
Well, it was a 2-story white house with the circular drive, and it had pillars in the front with a porch on the front and a porch on the back. Also had a swimming pool that was screened in, It was quite nice.
Was it on the water or have a dock?
Yes, it was on the Indian River, and then it was also on the coastal waterway. It was in between the two of them, and you could see both from where he lived.
Okay. So did he have a dock on both sides of the house?
No, he just had a dock on the Indian River.
Okay. And so that was a barrier island. That was Merritt Island, correct?
Yes, it was a
Okay.
very southern tip part of it.
Okay. So that's Brevard County, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Good. So we ID'd the house. And you found the job through the newspaper. He seems to like to do that. That's how we found Colleen Wood, another missing woman through the want ads. She
Well,
found
I
an
guess.
ad. Yeah, she found an ad that he was looking for somebody to sail around the world, And
Yeah,
she didn't
well,
quite get there, unfortunately. But who was the first person you met when you acquired the job?
well, I went in and interviewed with him one evening, and then the next day showed up to work and knocked on the door, and Vicki Laughlin was there. And I told her, "Hi, I'm the new helper," and just showing up. And she says, "Well, can you start by making some coffee?" And I said, "I don't know how to make coffee. Can you show me?" And
That's funny.
so I made coffee and then sat and talked to them for a little bit. There wasn't a lot of furniture in the house. I think Joyce, his wife, had taken a lot of things, but it was a big house.
So he interviewed you the night before. Where did he interview you at the house?
Yeah, I came over to his house and interviewed.
He was there alone?
I think so, yes.
Okay. What was he professional?
Yeah,
Yeah. How much money did he offer you?
I think it was like $400 cash a week.
400 cash a week. Okay.
Yeah, and I could live there. So I didn't have any expenses. So that was quite appealing to me at the time. I was 23.
Wow. Okay. 400. That was a lot of money back then
Yep.
in the 70s. And it was cash job.
Yep.
So you have to
Yep.
pay taxes on it, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So well, you mentioned Vicky's name, so let's explain who Vicky is. We'll just get that out of the way. She was the wife of John Paul Sr.'s crew chief, who was Stan Laughlin. And I hope Stan's listening to this and he comes forward if I can't find him. I would love to interview him too. If he's still alive, or did he pass away?
No, he's still alive. He
Yes.
lives up by Atlanta somewhere.
Okay. All right. I know Michael spoke about him at one time with me, and I believe it was about her that he was referring to. So she was an interesting person. Maybe I can locate her and get her involved in this podcast as well from her point of view. But anyways, we're talking to you now, so we're going to hear your version of events that took place. So JLP Racing, was that the name of his company back then?
Yes, it was.
It was. Okay. So he had that for a while. What children of John Paul Sr.'s did you meet and take care of in the house? Were they there present?
They weren't there at the time. They came down to visit him later, like maybe a month or so later. And John Jr. drove the kids up, and it was Tanya and Michael and John.
He drove down from where, Indiana?
Yes.
Okay. So Joyce had possession of them. She had custody, rather, of them, and she had visitation for
Yes.
John Paul Sr. Was that organized visitation, or was that, oh, I'm going to send the kids for you for a while?
I think that's what it was. Just you can have them for a while.
Okay. And what was that, in the summer, the winter? What year was that? Do you remember?
It was in 77 and probably a month after I got there. So maybe February or March.
Okay. All right. That helps with it with the timeline of events. Okay. Did anything stand out about the kids? Would they seem pretty normal, or you know?
Yeah, yeah, they were pretty normal. Johnny, the young John Paul, he was very nice and very polite. And Tanya was quiet, and Michael was kind of off the wall.
I'm not surprised. I have to say that because I met him. Okay. But go ahead. How was he off the wall?
Well, his dad would go away for quite a while, doing his racing. And while he's gone, Michael would act up. He would sneak his girlfriend in the house or sit on the roof and wouldn't come down, and take the sailboat, the little Hobie cat, out without saying anything. He was only, I don't know, he was probably 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And very much his own person.
Well, I don't think too much of that has changed. As an
I
adult.
liked him. I liked his character.
Yeah. So he had a good sense of humor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he's got that. That's for sure. If there's anything he has a sense of humor. So we spoke briefly before, so I'm going to touch base on some of the things that you told me that kind of stand out about John Jr. Did he help his father with any of his marijuana distribution that you knew of or saw?
Not at the time, but he did send him back home. I think it was like a Toyota Corolla. The car had a little emblem on the side of it that he took off and put a little square bag of something in there and hid it in the car. But that's the only thing I had seen with that.
So did you know what the substance was? Was it white, green? And green could be money too,
Yeah, that could be. Um, it was just you couldn't see what was in it, but
Yeah.
it was probably about 6 by 8,
Inches?
just small enough to put in there.
Oh, okay. So you take the emblem off and there was like a trap behind it?
Yeah,
Okay. And then you could stuff something in there.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it didn't make sense it would be money, because money you would keep on you, right? You wouldn't leave it on the car. I wouldn't, at least. Okay. So we can't 100% prove that it was marijuana or cocaine, right? I can't imagine him giving his son cocaine to go transport, but
Right.
marijuana, maybe. Okay.
He was quite young. I'd say he might have been just 16
Yes.
or
Okay.
maybe 17.
All right. So you thought it was kind of like, do you remember the color of the car?
It was silver.
Silver. Okay.
Yeah, a little kind of sporty car.
Maybe Michael would remember that car. Men seem to remember cars more than they remember faces and names and events and timeline. Okay. You mentioned to me about, we don't have to mention their names, but there was 2 women that were involved with John Paul who you knew he sent overseas to South America, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the purpose of that trip?
Well, at the time, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I'm pretty naive at things at that age. But she told me later on that he'd sent him down there to Colombia to pick up some drugs.
So when you say drugs, was that cocaine?
I'm sure it was.
Okay. Because it'd be hard for somebody to transport marijuana back on a plane. They flew there and flew back, these women?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So chances are that's probably what it was, correct? Do you think it was for personal use or it was for resale, for
I think it
distribution?
was resale.
Resale. Okay. All right. Well, there is a statute of limitations, so whoever did it can't get in trouble now because those days and era is over. But, just to protect the identity of the individuals who did that, because one of the women ended up in the Middle East, correct? From what you understood.
Yes, she took off to the Middle East and married a prince or somebody, but never returned. With She had her son with her too, and he was probably 6 years old. But she never heard from him again.
Okay. All right. Well, that's scary thought too. Just the fact that somebody, American girl, would go all the way to the Middle East and think that she was going to be safe, and her child is pretty scary, especially since she had ties to America. You didn't know any of her family or friends, anybody inquire about her?
I didn't know any of her friends, no.
No.
And Vicky never mentioned any of her relatives or friends, but she did say she'd never heard from her again.
So, do you think that story's true, or do you think there could be foul play involved with John Paul, seeing how he has a history of making people disappear? It was
Mhm.
story kind of far-fetched. I mean, did you ever know that she spoke to some prince or somebody Middle Eastern ever come to visit the house, or phone calls came in or whatever?
Um, I never thought of it as he would have offed her and her son. I mean, her son was just a little child.
Well, I mean, she did do a criminal act for him, so it's not impossible. But it was a story that was told to you, but it's never been verified. She just never was seen again.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, this story is not based on her. It's based on Chalice, and Chalice was married to John Paul, and she's been missing since 1981. And other people I've found through my years of research and investigative work that there's other people that went missing as well. So it's up to law enforcement to connect the dots here. But that's even as far back before Chalice in the 70s, of course, when this transpired. So you told me about, and I love this story. You told me one night you made a spaghetti dinner for John.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, John and Mike were there, and made dinner. And I didn't have any applesauce in the house. He had to have applesauce with every meal he had while we were out. Well, he had a fit and started throwing stuff and threw some meatball in his orange juice and just got up and left. So the next day, I went to the grocery store and definitely got some applesauce. Well, they were stocking the shelf at the time I was there, and it was funny because they had like four big boxes that they emptied, and I said, "Can I have those boxes?" And they said, "Sure." So I took them home and put them in the pantry in the garage, and it made it look like we had a four cases of applesauce. And he just kind of grumped at me, but Michael thought it was funny.
Did he actually pull the box down and look and see if there was any inside?
I don't know if he did or not.
Well, I mean, that was pretty ingenious. So at least
Well,
you had a sense of humor. But you're not the first person to tell me this, because his own son Michael said he had to have applesauce at every meal, and that wasn't in his interview. So when I conversed that with him, he was laughing because he knew it was true. I don't know if he remembers about the meatball and the orange juice. Who drinks orange juice with spaghetti and meatballs? Can you tell me that?
John Paul Sr.
And then end it with applesauce of all things. Well, he was a strange cookie anyway. So you know, I wouldn't put anything past him, including his eating habits. So his wife was divorced at the time that you were working there?
Yeah, I think they had divorced shortly before, and they had a bunch of avocado in their freezer, and he told me to throw it out. It was all like mashed up already,
Yeah.
and she was very upset that he threw that out.
Why? Because
But
she wasn't in the house.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she shipped it down to him, or she
No,
was
I think
there,
that's when she was there before they got a divorce.
and she froze the avocado.
Yep.
Well,
And then he also had Michael set up a stand to sell avocados because they had a big avocado tree in their yard. And that's how he could make some money.
I'm
So,
surprised he didn't give him, like some joints to go out and peddle in the neighborhood. No, I'm just kidding, because that was in one of his interviews. His dad got upset. He was rolling joints, and he didn't want him to sell weed on the side, draw attention to him. So he gave him a pound of marijuana and told him to roll up 50, and the rest would be his. The kid was on the wrong track at a young age, thanks to his dad. Um, did you ever go to the races with him?
yes, I did. I went to Road Atlanta with him.
Yeah.
I drove him up there, and we came in after the crew did. And then he also gave me a ride around the track in the race car, and that was kind of fun.
Well, he did that with Chalice. That's how he hooked Chalice in.
Oh,
Her husband at the time brought her to Road Atlanta, and he was a fan of John Paul's. And look what happened. He lost his wife over it. Yeah, seriously. But
I don't know what the big interest in him was. He's not very good looking, and had a very bad temper. One time they were hooking up his um, helmet with a microphone in it, and he drove around the track and came back, and he was so livid because he couldn't hear anything, and threw it on the ground and smashed it. And Stan said to him, "All you had to do is turn it up." that's that's how he was.
oh, well, no wonder they want to make a movie about him.
They should. They should.
Oh,
Oh,
well,
such.
I have to laugh about these things because it's very satirical, because the man is twisted. He's not normal. He did have a temper, and for all intent purposes, couldn't control his temper. And a lot of people were scared of him, especially in the racing circuit. But let's get off of him for a minute, because I'm very interested to hear about this next individual, because the only thing I found about him was in archived newspaper articles, and he was a fugitive and a person considered missing. Now, since before I spoke to you, I was able to gather some information about him, and his family appears to be totally disinterested in getting involved with helping me find out about his disappearance. They seem to think they've moved on, which I find very disturbing, because if somebody gets murdered, you don't just move on. Okay. This is for life. I mean, there's no statute of limitations for murder. One. Two, this guy doesn't even have a shot. I think the people who are missing, who are murdered, who are victims, they need to have somebody to be their voice. I know I'm Chalice's voice, but I have seemed to be a voice for this gentleman. And his name is David Joseph Cassorla. He was from Miami, Florida originally, and he ended up in the Gainesville area. And I know John Paul had connections to Gainesville. And then he got either recruited or elected himself to get involved and be a quote unquote partner for marijuana smuggling coming from South America. That's what I know, and that's a fact. So you tell me, you met David Cassorla at the Merritt Island house, correct?
Yes, I met him there. He'd been there a few times. Very nice man, I thought, and kind of quiet, tall, thin, and
Gotcha.
Vicky or the other lady was seeing him on the side too. So
Oh,
she was very attached to David, and she told me that he disappeared and she never heard from him again. And she was very upset that he didn't call her after they moved up to Atlanta. Uh,
who's they? She moved. This woman moved up to Atlanta.
yeah, the whole racing team moved up to Atlanta.
Okay. Well, you're talking about in the 70s, but he
Yes.
didn't go missing till what, a few years later. But you're saying that you spoke to her after the Merritt Island job, and that's when you found out that David was missing.
Yeah, she told me he was missing, and
Okay.
she said he would never not get a hold of her.
And do you remember that conversation? What's the timeline on that? Was that, a few years later, 5 years, 10 years later, recently?
Maybe early 80s,
Okay.
because I kept in touch with them.
Okay. So the early 80s, you guys had a conversation on the phone, and she said that you said, "How's David?" That's how it came about.
Right.
And she said,
Right.
"Oh, missing."
She said that she never heard from him again and he was missing. And he would not just be missing and not get a hold of her. There was something more than that. And that's all she said about it. But
Well,
she tried to find him.
but when she said he would have gotten a hold of her, is that because they were so close in friendship, or was there some business transaction between them?
Not a business transaction, more of a love affair.
Okay, gotcha. Well, did you know he was married?
Yes.
And did
And
you
he
ever
had
wife?
kids.
Yeah,
I don't know if I met her, but I knew he had kids.
yeah.
And it seems like I had met them, so I must have met her too.
He had twin daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you remember the two little girls? Do you remember how old they were?
Gosh, not really, but probably under 6 or 7.
And where did you meet them at?
It must have been the house.
Yeah.
One other time I had gone out on the boat with John Paul and uh, David. He had Michael clean the boat up and wax it. That was one of his little jobs. And so we took it out in the ocean. And I'm out in the ocean with these two guys, and I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't be out here. I was very naive at that age. Came from a small town, and things like that didn't happen.
So
But
when you went out on this boat, were you going out there to fish?
no, we just took the boat for a ride, and then I felt more comfortable that David was there. That I didn't think he'd let anything happen to me, but it did cross my mind.
So you had your doubts about John Paul, that he was a dangerous man then when you were working for him?
Yeah, but I didn't know how dangerous he was. I
Okay.
just thought he was a grumpy man.
He was grumpy, and you put two and two together that he's capable of hurting somebody. But why would that even cross your mind? Do you think you saw something you weren't supposed to see, or he just gave you the indication that he had an ulterior motive to take you out on the boat?
I think he could have had alternative motion to have me go out there, but I don't know. I was just quite uncomfortable. The fact I was in the middle of the ocean, and
Yeah. Feeling,
David was there, so I felt more comfortable.
yeah. So you felt vulnerable. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I can understand that. I'd be nervous out in the middle of the ocean with two men that I didn't really know a whole lot about, because it is the best way to get rid of somebody. Put some weights on them, they go down. Nobody's ever going to find them. They're shark bait. And I believe that's what happened to Chalice and to Collingwood. Now, David, we've heard rumors and stories and people in the circles that were running with him back then up in the St. Augustine area, under the impression that John Paul took him out in a private plane offshore of St. Augustine and pushed him out of the plane. That's the story. But did you ever go to St. Augustine with him or anywhere else other than the road Atlanta? You took a car up there with him. Is that what you did? You rode with him up there?
No, I had to drive because he wasn't allowed to drive.
Why not?
He'd lost his license.
Are you serious?
That's why he had to have a chauffeur.
He lost his license. And he's a race car driver.
Yeah.
Why did he lose his license?
Probably speeding.
Speeding. Well, I can relate to that. I experienced that firsthand, as a matter of fact. I'll tell you that. It's in one of my segments. So how long did he lose his license for? It was temporarily suspended at the time? Or
I'm not sure how long he lost it. I just came on as a chauffeur.
okay.
And I would drive him to the shop and I'd drive him to dinner and stuff. He'd take me out to dinner. And one time we went to the Sparrowhawk, a restaurant down in Cocoa. And he let me let him drive. So he was driving home and we got on the Merritt Island Road, which was a twisty little road. And he was driving so fast, I was freaked out because he was taking those turns to zip, and I knew I was going to die.
Same experience with me. Yes. When Chalice and I, the only opportunity I had to meet him when she was alive in Atlanta, when we were there for the screening of Excalibur, a film that Orion Pictures produced, and she knew the CEO of the company, and she got a personal invite. So I flew up and we rendezvoused and we went to that. And then I don't know if it was the next night. It had to have been the next night because this was a night preview of this film, that we went out to dinner in Sandy Springs to his favorite French restaurant. And then she says, let's go back to the house. And we did, and she ended up wanting to stay over. So I stayed in the guest room. And then the next morning, all hell broke loose because she found women's underwear in her underwear drawer, and it wasn't hers. So they had to drive us back to her car. I believe it was her car, my rental. I couldn't remember, at the restaurant. And she was harping at him and barking, verbally at him. No, physical contact or anything. And I was in the back seat holding on for dear life, leaving his house in Huntcliffe, which is a community up there, a nice housing community in Roswell. Same experience you experienced. So anyways, I just wanted to share that. I already mentioned that before in another segment. But so you talked about the fishing trip. You talked about David. Did Junior know David? Michael ever meet David? Did he meet? Was he at the house when the kids were there at any time?
Yeah, he was.
Okay, so
I know they know him
because
Michael cleaned the boat up for us to take out.
And did you hear any business being discussed between David and John Paul?
No.
Okay.
Which is probably a good thing, or I would have been in the ocean.
Yeah, because you weren't privy to what he was actually doing. Okay. So Tanya came down, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She came down with Johnny and Michael.
Okay.
And she's very nice. She was quite quiet and reserved. I took her and this young boy that was the lady who disappeared, her and her son. I took the kids to Disney. We had a good time, and I've got pictures somewhere. I will pull them out.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, we talked about that before. Any kind of photos, and if you have any you have any photos of David, by chance?
I don't think so. No.
No. Okay. All right.
He was quite an interesting guy because he was so quiet and reserved, and
Was he just coming around, just like hanging out, having dinner, or was it just John would call him and have him come over and watch a football game? I mean, what was the interaction between those two?
it was pretty secretive. You know, they I think he'd come over for dinner once in a while, but I think it was more they'd go out for dinner and just have their own little thing going.
Okay, so you didn't see them or heard them discussing any kind of trips made to South America, or any other third party person was not brought into the conversation? You can recall?
That's right. And I'm glad I didn't.
Okay. Did you ever meet John Paul's lawyers by chance?
I did one because, well, let's back this up a little. I drove over a bridge in Merritt Island, and a car or a truck had dropped a can of paint and splattered the whole side of my car. And I came home, and he took some lighter fluid to get it off and just smeared the whole side of my silver Grand Prix. And so he says, "Oh, we'll have the crew paint it for you." And so they painted my car mauve. And, and it was kind of a joke. And he says, "Well, we'll have them paint it again for you. It's okay." Well, in between that time, I quit. And he never painted my car. So I stupidly filed a claim against him and took him to court for small claims court to paint my car. And his attorney, I don't know if it was the one he used all the time, was there, but John Paul wasn't. And I won the lawsuit, but never got the.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Was his name Bruce Whitmer by chance?
I have no idea.
No. Okay.
You might be able to look that up. Where he had
probably too far back with public records if it's in the 70s, unless it's on microfilm. There's a possibility. So you filed that in Brevard County?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then his attorney took me out to dinner or for lunch afterwards.
Do you know do you remember what the attorney looked like?
Darker hair, kind of medium. Just nothing special. He was probably in his 50s.
He was in his 50s then. So if I was able to find a photo and send it to you, you can ID if it's one or the other, correct? And was he a Florida-based lawyer, or was he an Atlanta-based lawyer? Do you remember?
It was Florida.
Florida? Was he from Gainesville by chance?
I'm not sure. He probably just hired someone cheap to take care of it for him.
Okay, so so you think it was just a local attorney? Do you have any of those papers by chance from that time?
Probably not.
No? Okay. All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig up my archives. I'm going to send you photos of two different lawyers that I suspect it could have been. You can maybe ID them for me. But so when did you quit working for them?
I was only there about almost a year because I know I had been home for Christmas, and so it wasn't quite a year. And he got mad at me for something, which that's how he is. And I told him I was leaving, and he kicked me in the seat of my pants on my way out the door. And then he wouldn't give me back my dogs. I had two Samoyeds there, and he wouldn't give me that or my stuff. And he had to go out of town, so he had Stan stay at the house, and Stan gave me back my belongings and my dogs. So I was grateful for that.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, that's pretty nasty.
Hmm.
He kicks you in the ass and he takes your dogs.
Yeah, wouldn't let me have my
Not
dogs.
hurt at all. Okay. I'm sorry. I probably would have handled it a little differently if it was me in your shoes back then. But I meant to ask you, how old were you around this time? Were you young?
Yeah,
What
I
were
think
you?
I was like 23.
Okay. So, so he was just being downright nasty and disrespectful. So I guess the final question is, he didn't give you any severance pay, did he?
No, but I
Okay.
did give my dogs back. I was concerned he'd kill my dogs.
Ah,
He,
well,
he had a German Shepherd too, a very nice German Shepherd, and I was just really concerned about getting my animals back.
so was the shepherd trained to attack? Was it for
No,
no? Okay. Did he ever have up any kind of surveillance or infrared lights or anything for protection around the house? Did he have anybody guarding a house, any kind of protection whatsoever?
nope,
No, not at
nope.
all. Okay.
I think it was a little early in the game for that stuff.
Okay. Did it have a garage? Did you have access to the garage?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever see anything funny in the garage that was illegal?
Mm, no.
No? Okay. Because even Junior has admitted that in interviews he did that, he went out to get dog food in the garage and he found from ceiling to floor, it was stuffed with marijuana. And
No,
been another
no, no,
trip.
I
And
was
after
there.
your days there, I can, I can't imagine him telling this story if it didn't happen, but it must have been after you. Do you know who replaced you for that job?
Yeah, some lady named Crystal.
Crystal. Okay.
Yes. And I believe I met her at a funeral, oh, maybe 8 years ago with Stan.
Really?
Um,
Just 8 years ago, you ran into her?
right. My daughter and I went down to a funeral, and um, I went over to say hi to Stan, and he introduced Crystal. And she told my daughter that whatever I ever said about John Paul Sr. was true. It could be unbelievable, but it's true.
Well, do you think we could locate this Crystal? I would love to talk to her.
I don't know unless you got a hold of Stan.
Okay. All right. Well, you just gave me a good lead there. Just to add to the timeline of events. So this is in the 1970s. And as you know, in the 1980s, there was a lot more crimes being committed. And of course, disappearance and attempted murder of Stephen Parson, which all started in the 80s. Did he ever talk about making trips to Louisiana or to Atlanta while he was in Merritt Island at that time?
No.
No? So you never heard any conversations about trips he made and places he went. Did he ever go back to see Joyce? And did Joyce ever come to visit herself?
Joyce never came to visit, and I don't think he visited her, but his mom and dad came, and I met them,
And do you know
and they
what
were
was? That was the year you were working for him, right?
right.
Okay. And his father went by Lee or Lean Dirt. Do you remember?
Lee.
Lee. And did they talk in Dutch together or did they talk English together?
They talked English.
English. Okay. And he actually, did he have a home in Georgia too at the time when he had the Merritt Island house? Did he have any other properties?
No, just when they moved up to Atlanta, took the whole crew and moved up there.
Okay. And to finish off the timeline, there was a time that he took off when he left his, Joyce in Indiana and sailed around the world and then came back. So you're saying that when he came back was when you came into the picture through that timeline of events?
I believe so. I never knew he sailed around the world. He never mentioned that.
Yeah. Very important. Did he have his boat at his dock there? Did you see his sailboat of any sort?
No, he had a catamaran there, though.
Well,
that was the only boat there.
Yeah. Well, I'm not big on boats, but catamaran I would consider like a sail. Do you know the footage on that boat and the name of it at the time?
It was just a little Hobie cat, a little two-seater trampoline kind of.
Let me see if there's any other questions there. So he had a little Hobie cat, and there was no other women involved with him at the time that you know of, no relationships or anything going on?
Not that I'm aware of, except for the one.
Right. Well, maybe Crystal can continue this if I can locate her and tell me how her job turned out with him. I hope she didn't get kicked in the ass when she quit and had her dogs taken away. But if I find Stan, I'm going to tell him that I'm grateful that he came through for you. I hope he didn't suffer any repercussions for that, for doing the right thing and, giving your stuff back. I mean, what was the purpose of him thinking he had to keep your stuff?
He was mean.
Well, I'd hate to think that he was going to trolley off you too and then give your clothes away like he did with Chalice.
Goodness.
Who knows what would happen to the dogs? But anyways, this was a great interview and I deeply appreciate it. And I think that we're going to carry this on. Maybe we'll do a 3-way call possibly with Michael, because I think it would be interesting for the public to hear things. Because when you talk to somebody else, things get remembered and you go, oh yeah, I remember that time or this and that. And it helps with timeline as well. So maybe we can do that, down the road. And I'll let you know if I find any of these other individuals at that era and time. And thank you so much for verifying David Cassorla's relationship with John Paul. I know you didn't hear anything, and that was probably a good thing. But you really certainly helped out quite a bit, Nancy, with missing puzzles.
Well, this has been quite the adventure in my life. I tell people about it, and I think they go, sure. But
you mean talking about your 1-year employment with John Paul, or getting involved in the podcast?
No, working for John Paul.
Yeah. Well, you survived.
That's right.
I mean, he had a secretary who could have had her head taken off by him throwing his attaché case, his briefcase across the room. I would love to find his old secretary if that was possible. I think I know who. Well, I do know from Chalice's mother's house, the name of a notary up there. I don't know if she's still alive and still in Georgia or remarried, but that's somebody else I'm going to try to locate for my timeline. Well, listen, thank you so much for talking to me. You did a great job. And, when we're up in your neck of the woods, we won't say where you live, but I certainly will look you up and we'll have some lunch or dinner. How's that?
Sounds great. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. And I'm so glad that you found me through Crime and Sports. I will let those two guys know because they were hilarious. And I mean, they said some things that were kind of off colored about Chalice and her family. I think it rubbed them wrong, but it's satire. And they did an incredible job in episode 37, Crime and Sports. And you can see the video portion that we added to it on the Chalice Paul YouTube channel. And you can certainly leave a comment if you like. And I'll let them know that it's because of their story that you and I were able to do this segment. I will send them a link once this is up and running, and I'll send you one too as well. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon. I hope you're not too cold. I have the door open and it's like 85 degrees here. Not to rub it in, okay?
Well, thanks a lot, Lisa.
You're welcome, and thank you. And I will send you a link as soon as it's done. And my dog is playing his squeaky, and he's saying it's time for me to get off.
You take care.
You too. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.